I do not.
No, I actually have no idea.
Honestly, I don't know a lot about it.
I was a freshman at the time and I was living on campus, but when the fire happened, I had to go to Charlotte.
I think I was in the specific radius that they warned us not to be in. So I went to my friend's apartment and slept on his floor at NCA.
The fire burned for 4 days before the area was deemed safe for firefighters and the nearly 6,000 evacuated residents could return home. Through the events of the fire, the Winston, Salem, and Wake Forest communities became aware of some environmental justice issues that have long been intertwined with Winston-Salem's past. We met with Ella Klein and Stan Meiburg to learn more about the fire from their first-hand experiences.
I grew up in Winston, so I was here for the Weaver Fire, even though I wasn't at Wake Forest yet. When the Weaver Fire happened, I honestly wasn't thinking about the environmental impacts that much. I was thinking about, like, is my town gonna blow up? Like, my school was like 2 miles away from the fire, so it was kind of a big deal for us, and it was like a tough senior year.
At the time, of course, it was very severe, and the concern with that fire was that the fire chief had, and appropriately so, is once he learned there was that much reported quantity of ammonium nitrate on the site, he did the right thing and ordered an evacuation around the area immediately. So strategically, that was the right thing to do. Fortunately, no one was killed, and the fire itself did not explode. It was not necessary that an explosion would occur. You had to have a particular combination of circumstances for the explosion to happen, but you don't know that when you're in the middle of a fire. So from that standpoint, Winston-Salem was fortunate. The air pollution levels at the beginning of the fire were quite high. They dropped off relatively rapidly so that by Friday, things were pretty close to being back to normal.
We were like the first on the scene 2 years ago when it happened, or coming up on 3 now, because we were here and Wake Forest was within the evacuation line. So that piece was supposed to be written in January, and I finished it a month later than my deadline. I started looking and I saw a lot wrong, and I was like looking on other articles and I was like, okay, people are talking about this, but like not really. Like NPR, like our WFDD station, had been talking about it a little. So I found a bunch of information and money, and I did some little calculations and talked to a bunch of people and got in touch with like the budget planner of the city and our city council, and found out that the victims, the people who were affected by the Weaver Fire, there was a bunch of money allocated by the city. I forget the exact numbers now because I wrote the story kind of a minute ago. But there was a bunch of money that was supposed to be dispersed to them, and almost none of it was. And that was due to a lack of planning on the city's part.
It's worth distinguishing some of the features of the site. The site had been there since the late 1930s, if I recall. So this was not a relatively new development. It's also certainly true that Winston-Salem, as many southern cities, has patterns of housing that go back to the days of redlining, and those are consequences. And it's generally more true that quasi-industrial sites are more likely to be in areas that residentially don't look like other parts of Winston-Salem. So those things are very much factors. In terms of the fire itself, it's a little hard to point to, except that the evacuation order applied to a 1 mile radius around the site generally, which affected, apart from the Wake Forest students and apartments near here, affected an area that was probably a lower socioeconomic status than the areas in other parts of the west side of Winston-Salem.
The way that Wake Forest students handled and were treated in the fire was like really drastically different than Winston-Salem students or people who live there. The demographics of Wake Forest and the demographics of Winston-Salem are really drastically different. And the way that Wake Forest was handled, it's like, okay, like students were evacuating, people were getting in hotels, people were getting on planes, because a lot of people here like have the means to do that. Not saying everyone that goes here does, but like a lot do, and like a lot had the brevity and clarity in their mind to like post on Viz about it, or just like make a joke out of it. And like me and my friends were like 18 when it happened, so like I would think I was 17, so like we were joking around too, but like we couldn't evacuate. Like, we still had to go to school. And I mean, we weren't within the 1 mile radius anyway, but even people who weren't at Wake Forest, like, they all still evacuated because it was like too harsh to breathe the air.
Wake Forest itself had a good learning experience from this fire, from the standpoint this was something I don't think that anyone had ever anticipated. And so, and in some of their after action reviews, I think there was a recognition that one of the things that Wake Forest could do better is to anticipate other things that might happen. When you're involved in a response, tell people what you know, tell people what they don't know, tell them what they can do, and then, as I mentioned, encourage them to seek, if they have personal concerns, to seek care, assistance and advice from their healthcare providers.
Reading, keeping up with the community members, getting outside of the Wake Forest bubble sometimes can be nice. There's a lot of environmental activists and other activist groups in Winston-Salem that don't often come around Wake Forest. You kind of have to seek them out yourselves, and they're really cool.
Although it has been nearly 2 years since the Weaver Fertilizer plant fire, its memory lingers as a stark reminder of both the community's resilience and the environmental and social injustices it exposed. While the concern of a catastrophic explosion has since diminished, the fire left unresolved questions regarding resource distribution in the greater Winston-Salem community. For Stan Meiburg, the event underscores the importance of informed policy and preparedness. On the other hand, for Ella Klein, the fire highlighted the power of journalism to amplify the voices of victims and drive accountability for those in charge. Though the fire is no longer front-page news, its impact continues to shape conversations about community safety, equity, and environmental justice in Winston-Salem, reminding residents and institutions alike of the need to anticipate, address, and learn from such crises.